my feed's not that smart. I guess I don't know. I'm not around the smarter people. What do you
I think
see?
my feed's just mean.
What do you see? Like I literally do not know what the slander is about.
It's just stuff like that. Like that was the perfect example of promiscuous expertise. No Nelly Furtado, but it's promiscuous. Got him.
Stop it.
Got
Stop
him.
it.
Got him. How'd you get you back? How'd you get you back?
Underway. Like
So what
Ben
we're
Sim.
actually stop talking about Ben Simmons.
He's
You're
gonna
gonna
find
find
his
a
way
way
into it.
not to. He's gonna find a way not to play basketball. You're gonna be on IR from the show.
Shout out Ben Simmons. Yo, let's get you on the show. I know you got minutes. You got time. I know you got time. Let's chat. I like you. I'm a big fan. So I want to see if you can turn Phil around. I'm a big fan, man. Let's get you on.
All right, what are we talking about? What are we talking about today? What are we doing on today's episode?
Not Ben Sim, not Huberman, unfortunately. Why you should eat at your own restaurant? This is the first time I heard this quote. In general. So tell us a little bit about what it actually means and what you're actually trying to ask.
Yeah, we were talking with some folks about energy systems development, a little ESD, or you might call it conditioning. And I think the quote came about one of our colleagues, Jenny Noyles. Shout out Jenny. We're gonna get Jenny on the show.
What's up, Jenny?
Was talking about how often do you test the conditioning intervals you prescribe for your athletes, for your clients. If you're doing circuits, how often are you testing those? And I can't remember who someone said, essentially, are you eating at your own restaurant? And this is a quote I've heard before, but it's been a long time since I've heard it. And I think, to me, when I hear that quote, I'm essentially thinking like, are you leading by example? Are you walking the walk? Are you living your training philosophy to a certain degree? But what do you think? Is there anything like in line, out of line with that kind of thought process?
Yeah, now that you're saying that out loud, I know other companies have similar principles that just say it differently. Like at Google, they'll say eat your own dog food or something. When I first heard that, I'm like, what are you talking about? So yeah, it's a matter of understanding the product as a consumer before the seller. I think that's basically the principle behind that thought, and there's other ways to say it. I'm excited to just dive into talking about both sides of things, because sometimes you don't always have to eat at your own restaurant. Sometimes you got to eat at other ones.
I like that. Eat your dog's food sometimes. I like that that sentiment though of like understand like looking at what we do as a product and then trying to look at it from the lens of a consumer. I think is really cool. Like what's the consumer experience like? I mean, Google's obviously selling, tech-based products, so it's different. But I think, like you said, like there are some pros and some things that we can do to better understand what our clients or athletes' experience is like. Because again, that's gonna be important, right? Like, what is their personal experience going through a session? Experiencing the external load of the things that we're doing. Trying to understand that can only be helpful. But I think there's a couple other ways that we can get into. But before we get into it, why take the time to talk about this? About eating our dog's food. We're changing the title now to Eat Your Dog's Food. Eat your dog. Eat.
No, we're not trying to go down. We don't have lawyers, bro. Let's chill.
That's
we
true.
Can't
we
take
get slammed.
So
we're gonna redact that from the show. That's true. We're not changing the title.
Why are we talking about this? I feel like I don't know. Every time we say like it's not talked about enough, I feel like it is. We're just not in the atmosphere or the same circles that talk about it.
That's probably true.
But it's not talked about enough. It's not asked in the circles that I'm in of like, hey, have you done this workout yourself? Have you done this training session yourself? Do you know exactly that do you know the experience of the stimulus that you're prescribing? This 5x5 session, it looks nice on paper. There's a lot of articles on it. Have you done it yourself? I think that's like the question that's rarely asked, in my opinion. But what are your thoughts on there?
Yeah, no, I think it's cool to be able to say both sides of this statement, right? Like statements like this get thrown around and they're like, oh shit, yeah, true. Like that's you're right. Eat at your own restaurant. Like I feel that. And then like we don't think about it more deeply. It's just kind of one of those things like it sounds cool. It's catchy, it sticks. So it's like, oh, it's right. It must be something we're doing. But it's like, well, let's look at this from all angles and, let's think through like practically, does it actually make sense for you to do? Because it might not. Like it genuinely might not. So it's I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Hopefully the listeners find it interesting.
Hey, we find it interesting. And I think just the question of should you is the answer. Like it's not a yes or no, but it's based off of the people in front of your clients group. Should you understand or should you eat your own restaurant? Will that make that session better? Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. So I think the question, right? We want to make sure everybody leaves with more of a question. We're just giving our opinions, our Huberman anecdotal research thoughts, and hopefully you take away those questions and create your own thoughts from it.
For all of our listeners with weak ass tibs, let's get into it.
Trust me, you got strong tibs. Knees over toes guys will take care of you.
Oh my goodness, he will. He's got you.
He got you. He got you. But with your training, with your coaching philosophy, Coach Phil.
Yes.
Do you eat at your own restaurant?
Yes. Currently, I do. Some for self-experimentation, some because it's just I genuinely enjoy how I'm training right now. But especially working with more Gen Pop currently and more coaches who coach Gen Pop primarily or like mostly Gen Pop, I think it's just been helpful to enjoy training and then make objective improvements in a way that's sustainable and then then can we turn it and try to get this style of training in more people's hands. So what I'm doing right now, I'm playing a ton, so I'm playing more recreational sport, I'm sprinting a ton. That's something that I don't give to everybody just because it's hard on your body and not everybody like has sprinted regularly and so like high volume, high intensity, not even high volume, just high intensity sprint training can be tough. But like plyometrics, everyone's getting some form of jump training. Everyone's getting some form of, 1 or 2 heavy strength days. Everyone's getting movements that they enjoy. Like it's just that style of training. Like me talking about that philosophy more was born out of eating at my own restaurant and like finding my kind of and evolving my training philosophy. But there's certainly times where I haven't or when I wasn't. Like I think about when I was training for Olympic weightlifting and when I first got in the field and having personal training clients. And there was time. I think that's kind of what I learned. Like, all right, not everyone needs to train the same. Like I'm snatching and cleaning, jerking everyone, and they don't need to be in this restaurant. They need something a little bit better for them. But there's also times like later in my career when I was training hard for CrossFit, like training to compete, at the local level and having fun doing that. And my clients weren't doing that. Like, yes, some of the Metcons and CrossFit methodology got, found its way into some of my programming, but not a ton. But with that said, I also had a pretty good understanding of like what at that time, like what training for general health and fitness felt like, looked like, how to progress it, how to dose it. So like, if we're doing, more, quote unquote hypertrophy, like a quote unquote foundational phase of training where we're focusing on movement quality and competency, like I know at that point I knew how to dose it through my own experience, through experience working with other people, and then through just like trying to learn from as many other coaches as possible. You kind of get to a set point of like, hey, I'll start here. This is a good dose, and then we'll progress over time. So yeah, I think that's for me. It's like I am currently, but I haven't always. What about you?
When you say you haven't always, what is it? What do you mean?
Like like I was saying there's definitely times where I haven't, like I was not in the moment eating at my own restaurant.
And
So
that's
like what I
because
was,
you didn't see it was as useful.
yeah, like I just personally I had other training goals that were
Got it.
unrelated to my clients' training goals or my athletes' training goals. Like if I'm
Got it.
competing, if I competing in CrossFit, I'm not giving an athlete that stuff because that's not what they need.
Got it. Got it. Now, when you were coaching a little bit more in the field, were you posting your workouts on social media?
Not regularly. I'm a horrible
And when,
poster.
and when you did, I was just curious if some of your clients like said anything significant in the comments, if they did, like, hey, that's cool, or hey, can you teach me that? Like, was there any feedback there that you got?
Yeah, that's actually a great call. And I think like, yeah, there were certainly times when it was funny. It was like I'd be basically like living in two worlds, right? I was like coaching CrossFit part time and training that way, and then I was working for Exos on the performance side and working with athletes and some Gem Pop. So like literally like foot in two worlds. So like I remember like my colleagues at Exos and my manager would always give me a hard time and be like, why are you doing that stupid shit? And like athletes would be like, bro, you're crazy. Like that's crazy. And I'd be like, yeah, no, we got different goals, bro. Like you don't need to be jumping over a box like a silly goose. Like you can just jump on it. Like, and then we can move on. Like it was funny to see that. And then like the CrossFit clients that I was working with in classes, they would be like, this is sick. Like, cause we, mostly doing the same workouts and stuff like that. So it was kind of like, a sense of community, a sense of camaraderie. So that was cool. Like having that sense of community, having that sense of camaraderie, doing the same thing or similar things, like training for the same goal. Like I think that was cool for them, for a lot of them to see. And it made myself relatable as a coach. And it made it really easy for me to relate to them, right? And what they're going through and what they're doing.
Yeah. No, that's good. The reason I asked because like there's always two sides of the coin, right? And that's where we're always trying to get back to the middle, knowing that there's pros and cons for both. And when you play with like the sprinting, when you play with the plyos, you understand and the stimulus, not just from a research standpoint, but like you understand how it feels, right? How to do it. You might understand how to regress it yourself based off of just doing it.
Yeah.
So I think it allows you to learn, right? In that sense. But the reason I asked from a social media standpoint, like it's a powerful tool, right? It's like it's a tool that could be used for good, and we'll talk about later how it could be used for bad. So I think just in my experience, like I've seen that through posting some movements, some workouts that I've done, and using it as a way to inspire others to say like, oh, it's a buy-in tool at the end of the day, right? Like, oh, coach does what he had us do, or what he has us do, right? So it gives a little bit more weight into the things that you do, prescribe for clients. So, and that relatability piece that you mentioned too, like that's, I don't know any client that likes a coach that doesn't relate to them. I don't know. Like, I feel like that should just be, an unsaid rule. Like you just have to find a way to relate to your client. But I think there's those pieces that really stick out to me with why eating at the restaurant is important. Eating at your own restaurant is important to inspire, right? To understand the stimulus, and then for me, that's always been like one of those subconscious things that now I'm putting into words myself, which is very helpful to even just talk about it.
Yeah. No, I like that. It sounds like it, talking about relatedness, like a little bit of authenticity as well. Like, you're showing that you truly believe in what you're prescribing, so much so that you're doing it. We started talking about a little bit, within like, or at least up top, within understanding, why we're doing what we're doing, understand the stimulus, right? Like, I think that can be a powerful tool, especially for maybe a newer coach, or if you're even been in the field for a long time, but you're implementing something that you've never done before. Like minimally, like you can read about it, cool. Let me just try it, feel it. Let me understand the stimulus. Let me understand the progressions or regressions, like you said, some potential modifications. And then also for me, like one thing that goes a long way is it helps you understand the practical kind of kinks in the flow of a session that you could be on the lookout for, which again is like, that's important. Like the user experience is important. So like this is almost like, if we're talking about Google working on a new tech product and understanding the user interface, this is like the flow of the sessions, like your client's user interface. Like,
Yeah.
is the flow of the session smooth for them? And then, what can I learn about this thing that I've never done before? Like, cool, let me see how this feels. Let me see how I feel going through it. Am I as fresh as I want to be? Am I moving as cleanly or as with as much intent as I want to as I'm going through it? Like, so minimally, eating at your own restaurant, doing what you have your athletes and clients do, allows you to feel it out and see practically, does this make sense for my specific setup that I have in my gym?
Yeah. Yeah. Like if we can place the example of the session as our product, do we understand all the kinks as best as we can before it actually goes out to the consumer, our clients,
Yes.
our class? Right? Facebook, Apple, like Apple, their Vision Pro, I'm sure that Vision Pro was done like 10 years ago, but they
Yeah.
had their UI team, their user interface team go through the motions and like, oh shoot, we got to refine. Let's reiterate. It's not ready yet. Right? It's not ready yet. So it's one of those things. It's like, how do we refine as best as we can um, to make sure that the end product, which is the session that you're going to deliver, will be as best as you can understand it to be, knowing that there'll still be some kinks, but you know, you don't have to eat the whole restaurant, which is the whole session, but eat
Yeah.
some meals, right? Eat some meals here and there. There's benefits to
Couple
eating the
bites.
whole restaurant, but like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, know each meal, know the benefits
Yeah.
of it, know the downsides of it, and all that stuff comes to mind. So yeah, there's that thought of the flow of it, because I'm like, every time I taught a session, I'm just getting PTSD right now, bro. Like, I had 30 people one time in the class.
Yeah.
I don't know. I put something on the board. Like, man, this is dope. I haven't done it before, but these
Yeah.
workouts, these blocks, I've seen it before.
Yeah.
I've done some things, but like not everything. But I remember people were like, the more questions that they ask me, the less I feel good about the class. Like, hey, what are we doing again? What did you say? Where do we go? Those questions.
Yeah.
That's good feedback for me to say like, this session sucks. How many reps? What are we doing again? What can you show?
Like, this is terrible.
Yeah,
Damn
yeah.
it.
So I ate a lot more in my restaurant after that
Yeah.
flow
Yeah.
just went poo poo.
Yeah. Yeah. No. The 1000%. There's also like another piece in there too of like, I just have, she's talking about PTSD. I have PTSD from the first time I was teaching, one of the first time teaching movement skill and teaching like multi-directional movement with high school athletes. And my movement was so bad that they literally like made fun of me. And like high school kids are mean as is, but like this was just scarring, just a traumatic experience as a coach. And I don't, and this is kind of starting to transition into the reasons against eating in your own restaurant a little bit, but like I don't think you have to be a great mover to be a great coach.
You don't think?
Like you don't have to be a great mover to be a great coach, but it helps. Like it's a tool. So if you're good at, if you got super clean looking movements, you can accelerate well, you can change direction well, you can shuffle, you can cut, crossover, all that stuff looks great. Well, that can be a great learning tool for your athletes. But like, I mean, if CrossFit's taught me anything, like I'm not ripping muscle ups in a class to show someone how to do it, right? Like I'm not going through 30 muscle ups to teach someone how to do it, right? Like even though I can do it. I'm not like, that's not going to be my demo for the movement. Like, I'm going to break it down to smaller pieces and can explain the movement. Like, is there a way that I can get more creative with how I'm instructing verbally, right? Telling stories, using other athletes or other clients to show like who are better than me. Like, again, you don't have to be a great mover to be a great coach, but eating at your own restaurant, again, just taking a couple bites. Like, let me minimally run through one block of this and practice all the movements that I'm going to do, see how they feel together. Then a lot of that allows me to, one, show it proficiently, and then two, speak to what it's going to feel like, speak to some of the things that you're going to be thinking about and going through when you're actually performing it. So then it's like, it only makes the instruction portion better, more
Sure.
intentional, right?
Sure.
So I
I
think it can be
think
positive from that end.
you're right. We don't have to be a great coach or we don't have to be a great mover to be a great coach. But I think it's more likely to help you more than not to be a great mover in that
1,000%.
standpoint,
Yep.
right? So, like when you're talking, referring to like a big session, a lot of people in class, I think that's one tool, which
Yep.
is moving really well, using members who move really well to demonstrate the movement, right? And then showing, um, little more heavier weight. And then after you do the heavy weight, you rip a 315 off a trap bar and say, I'm going to have you do 5 of these. And you're just talking. You're not even breathing out your mouth yet, after that. So I think just that buy-in piece is pretty critical. And for me, I was talking to another coach about this last week. Like, I get some people whose first language is not English, right? And
Yeah.
if I could just move really well
Yeah.
without saying one word, they're gonna know what to do,
Yes.
right? So I think there's all these tools in the toolbox that we should be able to use within the whole session,
Yeah.
especially if it's a
For
group.
sure.
Use all of them. Use all of them. Use a member who moves really well. Rip up some 3 muscle ups. Rip up 30. Rip up 3. And then use all these tools to make sure we're trying to get everybody's buy-in or understanding of what we're trying to do for that session. So, not to take this in that direction, but there's that piece of like, it's more likely to help you to be a good mover
For
more
sure.
than not.
For
But as
sure.
long as you're working on it, like I don't think
Yeah.
you should. Not everybody's gonna be a good mover. I'm not the best mover. Like I got one Achilles right now, so I'm
Just
like,
say you got a commission.
I'm walking like this. So I think just trying to be a great mover every day it is the goal. But more on the side of being against it, like why I shouldn't eat in my own restaurant, why I shouldn't always take the sessions that I'm prescribing. What are some of your first thoughts when it comes to that to kind of push back against that?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of being a good mover, like, kind of starts to bleed into the idea of like an athlete becoming a coach, right? Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're a great coach or able to coach it well, right? So I think I've in the past, and I've known coaches in the past who are phenomenal movers. Like, everything looks good, looks super clean, but instruction from a verbal standpoint isn't great. Their cueing isn't great, right? The communication isn't great, right? So it's like, don't fall so hard on one side of, just, being a good athlete, being a good mover, that the other aspects of coaching, the other tools, so to speak, in your toolbox aren't that sharp because you're not using them as much as you should be. So, like, in a situation like you're in, like, now that you can't move, now it's like, oh, okay, I got to become an even better communicator.
Yeah.
Like, verbally, right? To get an even better storyteller, right? To get across what I want people to be doing. So I think that's one kind of layer of it, right? Like, just because you're a good athlete doesn't mean, and just because you can kill the workouts doesn't mean that you're necessarily a good coach. And somewhat in line with that, like, I think a coach's quality shouldn't be judged by their fitness level, their body, their aesthetics, their strength, their, you name it. Like, I think it's really by how can they connect with people and generate positive outcomes. and like, maybe their strength is one of the thing that draws you to connecting with them in the first place. But again, like, it's not indicative of your abilities of a coach. Like, I think about, I'm just like thinking about the coaches that I've known who have had like massive influence on me, and they've lived all the way across the spectrum. Like, I've had weightlifting coaches who like don't weightlift anymore and literally just like sit around and drink beers and they're not walking the walk at all, but they coach the hell out of me. And like, yes, they've done weightlifting in the past, but like at this point, they're not walking the walk anymore. And I've had coaches who are like in the trenches, training hard, getting after it, who have had a massive impact on myself and their athletes. So I think you can fall anywhere along this spectrum. But those are kind of two big ones for against. What about you for the negatives?
Yeah, I think for some reasons only certain sport coaches come to mind. Like I saw this clip of is it Calipari?
Mm-hmm.
What school again? You gotta clip this. My lack of college basketball knowledge can't be Kentucky. I saw him shooting a basketball, and Calipari is like one of the most well-renowned
like the best
coaches
like
ever, right?
Yeah.
Head basketball coach for Kentucky, and I saw him shooting a basketball from half court. Like even good basketball players look like they can shoot a basketball from half court, but this dude, like, he shot like he never played in his life, right? And when I saw that, and there's other clips of other coaches who literally cannot play basketball, but coach really well, right? So there's something within that goes to show, like, you don't always have to know exactly what the product is, but I'm sure he's done it in the past. There's a certain sense of reputation, that's there. So I think it's not a matter of doing the session, but understanding the session and having lived through it enough to care of what the end product is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think that piece comes to mind of like, you don't always have to do it, but what's the reason for not?
Yeah. And I think there's some good reasons, right? Like I'm thinking back to when I haven't or when other coaches I work with haven't, and it's like, maybe you're training for something specific, right? Like maybe, your class is more strength based, right? And that's your goal. You're hitting it hard on barbells, right? For a lot of your primary stuff, it's max strength focused a large majority of the year. And your training, you're like, you know what, I'm going to mix up my training because just to stay consistent, to try something new, and I'm doing something more endurance based.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to pull off of the max strength work. Like, I think that's like a cool challenge. And like, I think like, we don't like we put ourselves last a ton as coaches. Like this is a true service industry, and I think the best coaches do that. But sometimes we do it to a fault, right? And it's like, to take some time to do you for a second. Like do some training that literally you enjoy. Like if you want to get creative and try something different, try a different goal, and it's a break from what you've traditionally done, or a break from what your athletes are doing, what your clients are doing. Like that's cool. Like I think that's valuable for your own well-being, and that's only going to help you learn more. Like that, taking that break, doing something different, is going to help you incorporate potentially more different styles of training back into your program. Or maybe you learn that it sucks and you hate it and you never do it again. But that's still a learning piece.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's important as well.
No, for sure. And for some reason, as you were saying that, like I'm just thinking about a Sherpa, that's climbing Everest. And Sherpas, they from my understanding, they're alongside you. They help guide you to the mountain. And we as coaches are the Sherpas, right? And they don't have to be climbing and showing on the IG like, "Hey, I'm climbing this thing every day to have me trust them," right? But they know the route. No days off, up and down, baby. Wim Hof at the top, right? They're saying they're side by side. They know the routes. They know the places not to go. They know the places to go, right? They understand the climate changes within the mountain itself. And I think for me, when I look at that as a Sherpa, as a coach, do I understand all those variables that can come from the session, right? If my client's trying to climb Everest, let me make sure I can get them there safely, right? And they're not behind me, or they're not in front of me or behind me. It's side by side. Like, let's make sure this is a guided experience. Because the Sherpa might just be, I don't know, sleeping all 6 days. That don't mean anything. Like but he knows. Like he's been
Yeah.
there. He's probably like 70 years old, and he's walking people up. So, yeah. Anyway, I think he doesn't. We don't always have to do that. I think that's for some reason an example that sticks out to me when it
Yeah.
comes to that.
Yeah. No, I like this. I like that. Yeah, I think the last thing that comes to mind for me against is, and you talked about we talked about branding a little bit on episode 22. Talking about understanding our clients' expectations, but I think there's more ways to live your brand than just through the training that you're doing. And I think in looking a little bit into what does it mean to live your brand? Like that's the most corporate jargon nonsense that I think you could ever ever hear. It gets that way, but it's to me, it's like what you do consistently, and it's not just your training. Like it's how you treat people. It's kind of like the intention that you bring to what you do. It's the care that you bring to what you do. It's kind of the whole vibe and energy that you bring to your session. So I think there's more to your brand than what you're physically capable of or what you look like. And I think, sadly, our industry oftentimes gets boiled down into like what coaches look like or how strong coaches are, as like a guide for quality. Again, like that couldn't be further from the truth. And I think, there's way more important things like how you communicate with people, how you treat people, your knowledge of, like you said, your knowledge of the route, right? And your ability to guide someone along that route is way, way, way more important than if you have abs or not. So I think it's just, I think it's like, that's why in when we first started talking about this initially, like we had this idea for the show and started doing like some notes, and I thought, this is just going to be us talking about the pros and like why this is something you should be doing. And then, kind of quickly it was like, oh shit, maybe like most things, there's two sides of this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't
Yeah.
always make sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, especially with training, like training and the exercises itself is one thing, like you mentioned. And it always goes down to like the type of clientele that you're trying to attract or work with.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on the relatability. Relatability. There it goes.
There
Strategy,
it go.
relatability. Jewel, Santana. Hey. Hey. With like, you don't always have to look at your best.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what I mean by at your best, whatever best is deemed within an industry, 6-pack abs, all these benching 3 plates, whatever it is, like being strong, fit, and muscular is one thing if you're trying to attract certain clients. But if I'm trying to work with other individuals who are like a little bit more on the obese side, or a little bit more like who are working towards a pregnancy, right? I think they're probably gonna look for somebody that kind of looks like them in a sense, or understands their problems that they're trying to face.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of like trainers who are just not, deemed as fit in the industry. They're a little bit on the heavier side, but they're really knowledgeable. They're really smart.
Great trainers, great coaches.
They can demo whatever they need to demo, and it's that relatability piece again, right? So they're not like doing every single thing that they should be doing, because we're all humans at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But are you able to communicate and be relatable to your client, and especially with the clients that you're trying to work with?
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest piece with branding. Like who you are and what you're authentic to, does it match with the clients or clientele that you're trying to work with?
Yeah.
Because if there's a gap there, it doesn't really matter, right? If there's a gap, you don't have the authentic brand that they want to work with. So, yeah, I think trying to take us back with that, my thought just went there for some reason. Like going back to what I said earlier, like social media, man, it's a powerful tool, right? If young Phil was snatching on IG, pop every day,
He
top,
was.
top,
He was.
right? And yeah, ripped everything.
He did.
Right, and he ended with training with me, like two he was using that as a tool to say like work with me
Yeah.
because of that. I think that's one thing where we're kind of seeing this downside of always eating at your own restaurant to manipulate others and
Yeah.
not truly understanding, you know,
Yeah.
the effects of the sessions that you're going to give them. You know, we see it all the time with influencers. You know, just because they look good doesn't mean they understand the mechanism behind things and how it would work for you.
That's that's a good way to land it, right? Like, again, to reiterate that, like, just because they can train hard doesn't mean they understand like what the actual stimulus is and how the response is going to be from somebody else. That's so golden.
Yeah,
I'm still thinking about
yeah.
Joel Santana, but that was good.
Hey, hey,
Dipset.
and I'm gonna throw in a little MJ slander here. For some reason, Michael Jordan slander has been entertaining
For some
to
reason, I thought you
me.
were going to slander Michael Jackson. I was like,
No,
whoa.
no. I ain't doing that. Michael Jordan, right? He's one of the greatest basketball players of all time, and when he becomes a coach or an owner, he's been probably one of the worst, right? So I think there's something to be said about just because you're a good athlete, just because you're good at exerciser, is that a word?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you
Yeah.
can teach somebody that. So if there's a client listening to that, like you got to understand there's two pieces of that, and also as a
Yeah.
coach, like that shouldn't be the only thing that shouldn't be the only meal that you're eating in your restaurant. There's other meals that you got to
Other
eat
things.
sometimes.
Other dog foods.
The dog
Also,
foods.
to set the record straight, young Phil Snatching on Instagram did not have 6-pack abs. Body was looking like a bag of milk. But you know, what are you gonna do, JT? To try to land this, to fully land the plane, pull it up to the gate. What questions are you hoping that listeners tapping into this walk away thinking about?
We speak to the pendulum a lot. Two sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for it, against it. Where do you land? I think that's something we should ask ourselves because we can get caught up in the hype a lot of times. Where do
Yeah.
we land in that always eating at your own restaurant or not eating there? And I think asking the question of when would it be effective based off of the people in front of me? How can I truly understand the things I'm prescribing and the brand that I'm living? And does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love
What
it.
about you?
I love it. Yeah, now I'm with that, similar idea. What can you learn from practicing what you preach? Like, is there anything to be gained from that? Right, from a knowledge standpoint, like, are you learning about the stimulus? Are you learning about your own movement qualities? Are you learning about practical limitations of how you're programming? Like, what is it? Are you kind of assessing the user experience? Right, like, can you learn something from practicing what you preach? Maybe you can learn a ton, maybe not. Right, like maybe you've been in the game for a minute, you've been in your facility for a minute, and then you're training for other things, and that's okay. But just minimally, taking the time to ask that question.
Yeah. First, I was like thinking of this whole restaurant thing again, bro. Like when you were saying that, if a server were to come to you and be like, "What can I get you?" and you say, Young Phil says, "Let me get this bacon cheeseburger," and then you ask the server, "Is it good? You know, what's in it?" They're like, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it is actually." And it was the whole menu. They're like, "I don't know."
or like when you're like my dad always does this shit. So annoying. Like the server comes up and like, what do you what's your favorite? What do you recommend?
Yeah.
And then they were just like, I don't know, this place sucks, bro. Like, I'm eating down the street. Why you think I'm eating this place? Lost your
You
damn mind. You
don't
think I'm
know
eating
what
this
goes
place?
down in the back.
Yeah.
You have no idea. So I don't got no favorite, bro. Just order.
Just order. God, get out of my face. Order. It's just a Waffle House. We're just
my
in a
God.
Waffle House.
That's a normal day.
That's a normal day at Waffle
I love
House.
it. Oh
Damn.
man.
All right, JT, where can people find you?
Hey, on IG, Coach jt.mp3, and on Threads. Hit me up on there. I'm gonna start talking some more opinionated things like Huberman. So hit me.
Like Huberman. You can find me on IG at Nashville. You can find the show on Instagram, YouTube, and Threads at Pushin Performance. No G. None whatsoever. As always, if you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating and leave us a kind review. And do your boys a favor, share it with a colleague, a friend, whoever you think can level up from tuning in. And as always, we'll see you and your weak Tibbs next time.
Peace.
Rock with my fist, burning in the heat, roll in the rock with my